Hello, artist. Today is entitled What Happens After You Build Something. One of the strangest things about building things, especially the meaningful things, is that nobody really talks about what happens afterward. You talk about launching, you talk about starting, you talk about the dream, the vision, the idea, the goal. But eventually, if you're fortunate and you work really hard, the thing actually exists. So now what? Much of my life is today, much of my life now is built around things that already exist. The shows are written, the books are out where people can get them, the ones that exist now. The audience is there, the relationships have history, the opportunities have arrived and been taken advantage of. And creating something and caring for something are very different skills. When the child is born, they are anticipated for months and months before they arrive there. And names are back and forth, and ideas about, well, how will we raise them? What are our values that we want to instill upon this child? And then the child comes, and it is glorious and amazing and a miracle. And diapers need changing. And fevers need tending to, and tempers have to be quelled. And that's an ongoing job. You're caring for the thing you created. Your art, as has been said many times in the past, is your child. It is your creation. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes, after the shows are done at the Stanley, I find myself walking through the building long after everyone's already gone home. That hotel has a personality late at night. The conversations are gone, the rooms are empty, the laughters still kind of echo around the ceilings. The guests have drifted back to their rooms, and what is left is this comfortable stillness. Walking through the hallways, and I think about how many people have walked these same steps over the years. How many hundreds, how many thousands, tens of thousands have walked up this staircase, have looked out this window, have seen this view. Thousands of them, tens of thousands of stories, millions of moments. And what strikes me isn't the effort required to create the show, it's the effort required to keep showing up for it. Because the truth is, creating the show happened long ago, years ago. What I was doing this night isn't creation. It's stewardship. Every evening, I'm returning to something that already existed and asking myself the very simple question, how do I care for this well? How do I make it a little stronger, a little more meaningful, a little more honest, a little more alive? How do I avoid treating something meaningful like it's finished, simply because it's familiar? And I think that's where a lot of us get surprised. We imagine success will eventually remove responsibility, but instead, it often increases it. I've noticed this with performers and entrepreneurs and writers and speakers and all my fellow artists on the stage and behind the canvas, behind the camera, sitting at the piano, holding the guitar. And I've noticed it in myself, if I'm being honest. In the beginning, the challenge is getting something off the ground. The challenge later becomes remaining faithful to it. Because once something works, you're faced with a temptation that nobody warns you about. The temptation is to stop paying attention. The story works, so you stop refining it. The relationship becomes stable, so you stop nurturing it. A business becomes successful, so you stop listening. And the audience becomes loyal, and you may start taking them for granted. Nothing dramatic really happens at first. It simply becomes familiar. And familiarity has a way of disguising value. We stop seeing what sits right in front of us, That's why I've become increasingly interested in stewardship, not as a concept, as a practice. Stewardship is what happens when excitement fades and responsibility remains, that which remains behind. It's what happens when the applause ends, after the launch, after the celebration. It's the decision to continue caring for something long after the novelty has disappeared. And I think that's where much of the meaningful work of life actually exists. Not entirely in the creation, in the continuation. Not in the beginning, in the tending, to checking on the garden, taking out the weeds, and propping up the stalks, and making sure the sunlight is right, and the nurturing and the water is given in the right times. Once the garden starts growing, you're not out there just throwing seeds or planting new seeds right beside the plants that exist. You're going to choke your garden off that way. You're going to kill the plants that you're not tending to. When I look at the people I admire the most, they rarely impress me because they started something. They impress me because they stayed. They stayed with the craft. They stayed with the community. They stayed with the relationship. They stayed with the audience. They stayed long enough to transform effort into legacy. And that kind of work is quieter. It doesn't always generate headlines. It doesn't always create excitement, but it creates depth, true depth and meaning. And that's where you save people, and that's where you move people. Sitting here today, I can see the Rocky Mountains just outside of my window, not terribly far away. And I am increasingly convinced that much of life is less about building and more about caring, about taking the moment to really look around you and see what you have built and to tend to it. Where does there need to be a little bit of paint? Where's there a loose board that needs nailing down? Where's there a person that you love who is hurting, who just needs a word? Most of us already have something worth tending to. A dream, a body of work, a conversation, a community, an opportunity that we've almost stopped noticing because it's become so familiar. And the question isn't so much, maybe, for the true artist, what am I going to build next? Maybe the better question is, what deserves more of my attention right now? Because the things that matter the most rarely ask us to become someone new. More often, they ask us to return, to show up again, to listen again, to care again. And perhaps that's what stewardship really is. Not ownership, not control, just the quiet willingness to keep tending something valuable after the excitement of building it has long passed away. I have heard it said, there's an old saying, that the performer builds new material and keeps the same audience. The professional keeps the same material and expands the audience. And in a way, both of those things are true, and that's the nature of life itself. The artist creates. I'm not saying you should stop creating altogether. But have you taken the time to really look at the quality that you've built so far? Tend to the garden you have before you start expanding it, if you ever expand it at all. In 13, in the Seance show, I feed 13 people at a time. I am not striving for an auditorium of thousands or a spot in Madison Square Garden. That's not something I've ever really held dear or felt was really necessary for what I do. I work up close. I always have. I feed 13 people at a time. I love the showing up. I love spreading the feast that I have prepared in front of these 13. And I watch closely, and I listen, and I try to tend to my garden well. to see what they are getting, what value they're getting in the repast that I put in front of them. I hope that makes sense to someone out there. Be quietly willing to keep tending that which is valuable. The garden does not need more seeds at the moment. Thanks for dropping in. Thanks for spending these few minutes with me. If you want to continue these conversations, you'll find more reflections in my books, the newsletter that I put out, the Patreon, and of course, as always, across the table. Take good care of what you've already been trusted with, and I hope there is love where you are.